Hello there, welcome to Brain Blitz Audios. Today, let's read a gripping story titled Adventures in a Banyan Tree, written by Ruskin. This is found in the first unit of the English textbook for grade 10 students of the state syllabus. Now, nature is for all living beings. Man should live in harmony with nature. Being one with nature is always mesmerizing. Have you ever got a chance to spend your leisure time with nature? Let's read how a boy experienced and blended with the essence of nature. Adventures in a Banyan Tree. Though the house and grounds of our home in India were grandfather's domain, the magnificent old banyan tree was mine, chiefly because grandfather, at the age of 65, could no longer climb it. Grandmother used to tease him about this, and would speak of a certain Countess of Desmond, an English woman who lived to the age of 117, and would have lived longer if she hadn't fallen while climbing an apple tree. The spreading branches of the banyan tree, which curved to the ground and took root again, formed a maze of arches, gave me endless pleasure. The tree was older than the house, older than grandfather, as old as the town of Dehra, nestling in a valley at the foot of the Himalayas. My first friend and familiar one was a small gray squirrel. Arching his back and sniffing into the air, he seemed at first to resent my invasion of his privacy. But when he found that I did not arm myself with a catapult or air gun, he became friendlier, and when I started leaving him pieces of cake and biscuit, he grew bolder and finally became familiar enough to take food from my hands. Before long, he was delving into my pockets and helping himself to whatever he could find. He was a very young squirrel, and his friends and relatives probably thought him headstrong and foolish for trusting a human. In the spring, when the banyan tree was full of small red figs, birds of all kinds would flock into its branches. The red-bottomed bulbul, cheerful and greedy, gossiping rosy pastures, and parrots and crows, squabbling with each other all the time. During the fig season, the banyan tree was the noisiest place on the road. Halfway up the tree, I had built a small platform on which I would often spend the afternoons when it wasn't too hot. I could read there, propping myself up against the bole of the tree with cushions taken from the drawing room. Treasure Island, Huckleberry Finn, the Mowgli stories, and the novels of Edgar Rice Burroughs and Louisa May Alcott made up my bag of very mixed reading. When I did not feel like reading, I could look down through the banyan leaves at the world below, at grandmother hanging up or taking down the washing, at the cook quarreling with a fruit vendor, or at grandfather grumbling at the hardy Indian marigolds, which insisted on springing up all over his very English garden. Usually nothing very exciting happened while I was in the banyan tree, but on one particular afternoon, I had enough excitement to last me through the summer. That was the time I saw a mongoose and a cobra fight to death in the garden, while I sat directly above them in the banyan tree. It was an April afternoon, and the warm breezes of approaching summer had sent everyone, including grandfather, indoors. I was feeling drowsy myself, and was wondering if I should go to the pond behind the house for a swim, when I saw a huge black cobra gliding out of a clump of cactus and making for some cooler part of the garden. At the same time, a mongoose, whom I had often seen, emerged from the bushes and went straight for the cobra. In a clearing beneath the tree, in bright sunshine, they came face to face. Cobra knew only too well that the grey mongoose, 3 feet long, was a superb fighter, clever and aggressive. But the cobra was a skillful and experienced fighter too. He could move swiftly and strike with the speed of light, and the sacs behind his long, sharp fangs were full of deadly venom. It was to be a battle of champions. Hissing defiance, his forked tongue darting in and out, the cobra raised 3 of his 6 feet off the ground and spread his broad, spectacled hood. The mongoose bushed his tail. The long hair on his spine stood up. In the past, the very thickness of his hair had saved him from bites that would have been fatal to others. Though the combatants were unaware of my presence in the banyan tree, they soon became aware of the arrival of 2 other spectators. One was a miner, and the other a jungle crow, not the wily urban crow. They had seen those preparations for battle, and had settled on the cactus to watch the outcome. Had they been content only to watch, all would have been well with both of them. The cobra stood on the defensive, swaying slowly from side to side, trying to mesmerize the mongoose into marking a false move. But the mongoose knew the power of his opponent's glassy, unwinking eyes, and refused to meet them. Instead, he fixed his gaze at a point just below the cobra's hood and opened the attack. Moving quickly until he was just within the cobra's reach, he made a feint to one side. Immediately, the cobra struck. His great hood came down so swiftly that I thought nothing could save the mongoose. But the little fellow jumped neatly to one side and darted in as swiftly as the cobra, biting the snake on the back and darting away, again out of reach. The moment the cobra struck, the crow and the miner hurled themselves at him, only to collide heavily in mid-air. Shrieking at each other, they returned to the cactus plant. A few drops of blood glistened on the cobra's back. The cobra struck again and missed. Again, the mongoose sprang aside, jumped in, and bit. Again, the birds dived at the snake, bumped into each other instead, and returned, shrieking to the safety of the cactus. The third round followed the same course as the first, but with one dramatic difference. The crow and the miner, still determined to take part in the proceedings, dived at the cobra, but this time they missed each other as well as their mark. The miner flew on and reached its perch, but the crow tried to pull up in mid-air and turn back. In the second that it took him to do this, the cobra whipped his head back and struck with great force, his snout thudding against the crow's body. I saw the bird flung nearly 20 feet across the garden, where, after fluttering about for a while, it lay still. The miner remained on the cactus plant, very wisely refrained from interfering again. The cobra was weakening, and the mongoose, walking fearlessly up to it, raised himself on his short legs, and with a lightning snap had the big snake by the snout. The cobra writhed and lashed about in a frightening manner, and even coiled itself around the mongoose, but all to no avail. The little fellow hung grimly on until the snake had ceased to struggle. He then smelt along its quivering length, and gripping it round the hood, dragged it to the bushes. The miner dropped cautiously to the ground, hopped about, peered into the bushes from a safe distance, and then, with a shrill cry of congratulation, flew away. When I had also made a cautious descent from the tree and returned to the house, I told grandfather of the fight I had seen. He was pleased that the mongoose had won. He had encouraged it to live in the garden, to keep away the snakes, and fed it regularly with scraps from the kitchen. He had never tried taming it, because a wild mongoose was more useful than a domesticated one. From the banyan tree, I often saw the mongoose patrolling the four corners of the garden, and once I saw him with an egg in his mouth, and knew he had been in the poultry house. But he hadn't harmed the birds, and I knew grandmother would forgive him for stealing as long as he kept the snakes away from the house. The banyan tree was also the setting for what we were to call the strange case of the gray squirrel and the white rat. The white rat was grandfather's. He had bought it from the bazaar for 4 annas. But I would often take it with me into the roots and branches of the old tree, the banyan tree, where it struck up a friendship with one of the squirrels. They would go off together on little excursions among the branches. Then the squirrel started building a nest. At first, she tried building it in my pockets, and when I went indoors and changed my clothes, I would find straw and grass falling out. Then, one day, grandmother's knitting was missing. We hunted for it everywhere, but without success. Next day, I saw something glinting in the hole in the banyan tree. Going up to investigate, I saw that it was the end of grandmother's steel knitting needle. On looking further, I discovered that the hole was crammed with knitting, and amongst the wool were 3 baby squirrels, all of them white. Grandfather had never seen white squirrels before, and we gazed at them in wonder. We were puzzled for some time, but when I mentioned the white rat's frequent visits to the tree, grandfather told me the rat must be the father. Rats and squirrels were related to each other, he said, and so it was quite possible for them to have offspring. In this case, white squirrels. That's all, folks, of the story Adventures in a Banyan Tree, written by Ruskin Bond. Ruskin Bond is an Indian author of British descent, and his father was an officer of the Royal Air Force. He wrote his first novel, The Room on the Roof, at the age of 17. It got the John Lewin Rice Prize in 1957. His first children's book was The Angry River. In 1992, he received the Sahitya Akademi Award for his short story collection, Our Trees Still Grow in Dara. He was awarded the Padma Shri in 1999 for his contributions to children's literature. He even got the Lifetime Achievement Award in 2017. He now lives with his adopted family in Landor, near Missouri. So, if you've liked the story, then why don't you give us a subscription at Brain Blitz Audios? We have a lot of stories like these, and you can always get our latest updates by hitting the notifications button down below. You can also share your views in the comments section down below. So, until the next episode, take care, stay safe, bye-bye for now.